Welcome to my presentation on how much apocalypse in the apocalypse. I have had so many tries recording this without a mistake, and now I'm just ignoring all that, so I hope this will be okay and I won't have too many mistakes in my presentation. I'm just completely not used to this kind of format, so excuse that. I also wanted to finish this early enough for you to watch around Frog 2024, but for some reasons I wasn't able to finish early enough. So, better late than never. Also wanted it to make it much less boring, but now here we go with the classical presentation. Sorry for that. Next time, I promise it will be more exciting. What do I want to talk about? I want to talk about the apocalypse. I want to talk about what we regard to be post-apocalyptic games. I want to talk about what that means, that term, that word. I want to talk about the origins of that work and what apocalyptic imagery is. And I also want to condense an apocalyptic pattern that we can lie on games that we would describe as being apocalyptic, and then have a look if they are indeed apocalyptic. So what are post-apocalyptic games? I think most of us, when we describe a game as post or apocalyptic, we have a nuclear war in mind or zombie apocalypse. I have tried to create 4 categories here, not comprehensive, of course. And the most exciting is the last one, but I'll begin with the first one, which is the post-war category, which is probably one of the most famous, with the famous Fallout series, Horizon, Metro, Armored Core, Neo, Wasteland, and Half-Life. Then we have post-pandemic, which is, of course, where all the zombie apocalypses is located in. We have The Walking Dead, Days Gone, Daisy, Hollow Knight, Left 4 Dead, The Division, 7 Days to Die, Last of Us, many more. Also Bloodborne, which is one of my favorite games of all time, is located here. Then we have climate-related apocalyptic games, obviously Frostpunk, Endzone, Also Long Dark. And we have, as I said, the most exciting, interesting category, which is Other. Always the most exciting category. Here we have games like Blasphemous, Stalker, Mad Max, Elex, Borderlands, which cover apocalyptic tropes or topics, but not really have a clear apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic setting in the term that we have this pattern that we will describe. So what does post-apocalyptic mean? In popular culture, it's very easy because, I just described it. We describe post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic as a situation in which a civilization is destroyed by a severe event, and a protagonist or remaining society has to adjust to the new situation and build a new life. The post and post-apocalyptic would emphasize the aftermath of the event. So, for example, when there's a nuclear war, the focus would be after that war, for example, in Fallout. The etymological origin, however, is something completely different because it has nothing to do with destruction or a renewal. Apocalypsis means a revelation in Old Greek and originates from the Novum Testamentum Graece, which is the New Testament for most of you probably, and the original Greek form, and one of the most important books for Christian apocalyptic thought, at least, the Revelation of John, begins with this word. It begins with the word ἀποκάλυψις Jesu Christu. And there you go. It is the revelation of Jesu Christu. Not the coming, not the destruction of the world, nothing to destroy. It's a revelation. So how do we come from this revelational aspect of apocalyptic to this destruction thing? Well, let's talk a little bit about the religious context. Apocalyptic thought is part of eschatology. Eschatology is the doctrine of salvation, and very common in most religious doctrines, and present in most religions, not only in the Abrahamic one. Although here we know apocalyptic or thought or eschatology mainly, of course, from the Abrahamic ones, it is not exclusive here. It describes how humanity has to behave or what has to happen for them to transgress in a better world, in a future where the deity is living amongst us, stuff like that. So apocalyptic thought in eschatology describes the end situation, while eschatology describes the whole process from here to there. And so the apocalyptic event is describing is characterized as the revelation of a deity as part of the end of the given era. So the coming of Christ, for example, would be such event. I probably should comment that I am talking about this from a non-Christian perspective, because I think always with religious topics, you might look on it a different way when you're believing. So, as I have said, eschatology and apocalyptic thought is part of many religious doctrines, mainly known in Europe from the Abrahamic ones, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But there are also other religions also present in Europe, but were located elsewhere, who have strong apocalyptic or eschatological topics in their religious narration. For example, the Zoroastrian or Gnostic religions, but also, for example, Northern mythology has that. The Ragnarok is a classical apocalyptic topic. And not only this, also Hinduism, Buddhism, like there are many, many religions in the world who have certainly an eschatology, but often also an apocalyptic topic in there, or at least an apocalyptic tone. The apocalyptic event is often accompanied by violent warfare, deadly diseases, or cosmic signs to show the coming or revelation of the deity or its emissaries, and this is also why we connect the apocalypse to something destructive. It's not like the revelation itself is destructive, but since everything is going to be destroyed more or less because of this warfare, and then something new has to grow out of it, there is a certain destruction embedded in apocalyptic thought, and that is why we connect it that way. To give you an example of a story or of a book that you probably all know multiple images out of that, but have probably never read it, although I would highly suggest to read it because it is a fascinating description of what Christians in these days believed or at least wrote about what would come when God is coming, which is the Revelation of John. The Revelation of John is describing the events when God is revealing itself to humanity. Also, you all have heard of the apocalyptic writers. These are also originating from the Revelation of John. It describes the return of the souls of the martyrs who demand the judgment, the final judgment, of course, and it describes how the revelation of God is accompanied by earthquakes, plagues, frightening cosmic and climatic events. It describes battles in heaven and on earth, and obviously good versus evil. I could go more in detail here, but that, since that's not the topic, I would rather suggest, if you are interested in the topic, you have a look in the literature. Another word you have certainly heard of is Armageddon, which is not describing an event, but a place. It's the place, nowadays it's called Megiddo, it's in Israel, the place where the final battle between God's followers, like the good and the bad people, are fighting each other, and it's called Armageddon, like the place, as I said. This whole thing will be followed by a 1,000-year rule by Christ and its followers. This is also typical. Normally, like at least in Abrahamic context, Islam has it the same way. The coming of God is somehow accompanied by an almost autocratic regime of a prophet or messiah who rules for a certain time span among its followers. And this is followed by the creation of a new heaven and a new earth on which God is ruling among humanity, and they will live lives without mourning or pain. So everything will be better then, because it's only the good people, of course. The bad people have died, were killed, or were judged to land in hell or whatever, depending on where you stand or what your story tells you. A short notice to the topic of apocalyptic imagery. Well, the creatures that accompany God, so its court, are far from being what we know of in terms of how angels, for example, look. I mean, of course, many angels are coming and joining, but there is a very, very big angel hierarchy involved there. So not every angel is the same as every other angel. And they all don't look like the angels you might know from romantic pictures or statues or stuff like that. Angels are terrifying. These are, like this depiction is a not so terrifying one. These are angels with 6 wings, and they can have different heads. I mean, these are anthropomorphic heads, but they also can have animal heads. And they are especially not, I mean, they are absolutely not human-like. Even worse, these angels, Ophanim, they are called. So you've heard of probably the seraphim, the cherubim, and these are the Ophanim. And Ophanim look like wheels in wheels. They have eyes in these wheels, and sometimes they have wings. But as you might see here, I mean, they are obviously not human-like. And this, I think, depicts very well the idea of that heavenly creatures are like creatures that go beyond human imagination and the limits of the human mind, and thereby creating this clear idea of the worldly limitation of humans. And for our context here, apocalyptic imagery is, of course, more close to what we would know from Lovecraftian novels than what we would understand as being angel-like. I really like this cartoon strip, which exists in many different forms, but I think it very much describes the difference between how we think angels look like and how the literature thinks angels look like. So apocalyptic imagery is almost not existing in many games or films that we would describe as being apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic. Why that is, I will come to later. They are often visionary and hallucinatory. I would suggest here not only to read the Revelation of John, but also the visions of Ezekiel and Daniel, at least the visionary parts of them. And deities and their court are often closer to mythical creatures than humans. Also, God itself is not looking human-like. It's a deity. It's not limited like a human body. Well, even also in the Abrahamic context. So also deities in their court are not necessarily nice. They are supposed to be terrifying because humans have to worship them. Humans have to be submissive to them. They have to understand deities are not equal to humans. And these often dark and brutal images and also dark and brutal stories that are told are also contrasting the supposedly bright future that will come after the apocalyptic event. So the eschatological salvation that comes after that, at least for the believer, that is. So we have an apocalyptic pattern here. We always have a civilization or community that is losing moral ground and forgets about its deity, being generally ignorant, losing human values, like having human megalomania, whatever. There are many, many reasons why an apocalypse is taking place, and but this is often the situation where we start. Then this is interrupted by an extreme event, which could be a war or whatever, intruding army, climatic events, earthquakes, plagues, stuff like this. And as a follow-up to these events, the deity reveals itself, is often establishing first an autocratic regime by its messiah or prophet, and thereby saving the good people from the bad, and rebuilding a new and cleansed civilization. So again, you're only going to survive the apocalypse when you're a believer. And then after this, in the post-apocalypse, so to say, humanity will rebuild its world under the governance of its deity, and everything will be shiny and bright. But why is that? So an apocalyptic story has a reason. It's nothing for, like, there is no religious necessity for that. It's a very, very earthly reason why these stories exist. They strengthen the group identity in times of an elementary external threat. So often apocalyptic stories are written or told in exile. They serve as a framework of sin and salvation to enforce moral and commitment and order among the believers. And again, that is especially important in exile or when your community is under threat. It reinforces foe narratives. For the Revelation of John, this is, for example, Christians versus Romans. Like, this is very, very superficial, and one could go much further into detail here. But that's not our topic here. And it explains events and developments that may not fit existing narratives, hopes, and beliefs. So when you think you are the chosen people, but everything goes to shit, you need a story why that is. And obviously it's often that God is testing you, but also certain signs can be interpreted as apocalyptic signs, which you can also observe today in, for example, evangelical contexts. This is a very big topic. So an apocalyptic doctrine is directed mainly internally to the people themselves, to the believers, and not so much to the outside. And that is something which is very central, I think, when we talk about apocalyptic thought. So let's break it down. Humans are doing bad things, then death and destruction, and in the end everything will be better. And that's it. And that's it also where we can begin talking about games. So, are apocalyptic games apocalyptic? We will do very superficial case studies here. I have collected 5 games, like at least one game from every category of earlier. And this is, like, obviously not going to detail. And I think one could go to detail for every of these games. But let's shortly discuss these games. So Fallout. Well, I would say Fallout gets an apocalypse score of only 1 of 5, because there is no eschatological element whatsoever. There is no bigger story connected. It's simple. There was a war and humanity has to deal with the aftermath. There could be a secular minimal pattern. As I described it, humans were bad and self-inflicted almost annihilation, and then in the end they have to deal with the outcome. Conflicts are basically the same as before. There is no real reinvention on how humanity will go on to to develop, and the bigger picture is almost irrelevant. The personal stories are much more dominant, and, well, I think many would agree when I say Fallout's strength is not its story. And, well, it's a nice sandbox, and as I said, the basic pattern is there, but in the, like, when we think about the origin of apocalyptic thought, for example, I mean, yeah, you could say there is some apocalyptic imagery involved with the monsters existing here, but this is all very low-level apocalyptic. Second example, Last of Us. Last of Us is an interesting game in that regard, and as you can see, I've given it 0.5 points more than Fallout, because there is, again, almost no eschatological element besides maybe the idea of Ellie in the first part being a messianic savior figure, because she could be the potential source of a cure. Again, the secular minimum pattern could be applied. Conflicts are the same as before. There's no reinvention, but there can be argued to be revelational aspects here. First, again, the revelation of Ellie as a potential source for a cure in part 1, and also in part 2, the revelation that there is no good or bad, or that this is much more nuanced than in most other apocalyptic games. When we look at the development of Ellie and her counterpart. So, A Plague Tale. We get to more apocalyptic games now. I have given it a 4 out of 5 because it is embedded in a highly religious apocalyptic narrative. So it much easier fits apocalyptic patterns, also in a religious sense. There is an eschatological narrative with Hugo as a savior or messiah, in addition to the messianic lacuna cult in Requiem, which is itself an apocalyptic story in an apocalyptic story. So a clear eschatological element here. And you could understand rats as an allegory to the 7 plagues, which are source, like the 7 plagues are described in the Revelation of John. Source, bloody water, darkness, thunder, collapsing cities, battle of Armageddon. All these are kind of existing in Plague Tale, and I think one could easily argue that the rats are similar to the Gog and Magog, or like the enemy parties that will also fight the good people in the Battle of Armageddon. Last point, there are the corrupted churches, and there are also other enemies that can be understood as an allegory of humanity's sinful corruption, which ultimately leads to the apocalyptic event. Like, God sent the rats to, as a result of that corruption. So, much more apocalypse here. And I think the most obvious game I chose is Blasphemous, which has a apocalyptic score 5 of 5. In Blasphemous, the miracle wants you to suffer. That is, I think, the bottom line here. The game is embedded in a highly eschatological and apocalyptic setting, which is extremely religious. It is truly post-apocalyptic because it takes place after the revelation of the deity in form of a miracle, and within it, the era of its reigns, and it kind of is the antithesis of all this salvation thing, because salvation in Blasphemous is rather a condemnation. I mean, you're rescued, and the miracle rescues from your humanity, and that it lets you suffer. So Blasphemous tells the apocalyptic antithesis to the supposedly strengthening and reassuring Christian eschatology. Turns out God is bad. Well, sorry about that. The imagery is extremely apocalyptic. It takes up on many, many different images and imagery that you can see in apocalyptic stories and depictions. So everyone who is interested in this should definitely play it. also, I think, one of my most favorite side-scrolling games. This is just fantastic. The art and how the story is embedded is just great. But besides my own bias, of course, I think this is indeed an apocalyptic game. The last game I chose was Frostpunk because I wanted to have something from the climate apocalypse. It is, again, a rather low apocalyptic score because there is no eschatological setting and only a secular minimal pattern. Especially in Frostpunk, you could argue that the snowstorm is narrated in a similar fashion as the plagues are the revelation because it comes without reason. So one could argue humanity was bad and that's why God sent the snowstorm, but this is completely absent in the story. Conflicts are the same as before. Okay, you could argue there is a reinvention in society as it has to change the way it is organized or lives on. That is why I have given it a 2 and not less, but still, not that apocalyptic. So bottom line, if we follow the religious and original understanding of the apocalypse as a doctrine, well, very, very few games are indeed apocalyptic. However, I mean, we have our present-day understanding of what post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic means, and given this secular, broad definition of the term, I'd say it is very okay to describe also games as Fallout as post-apocalyptic, although they in the very narrow sense might not be. So it's fine to still call it post-apocalyptic. I hope that you had learned something and that I could teach you something new about the topic. There's no way to answer questions here, so if you have some, I guess maybe you have to write them in the comments. I don't know if it works here. Otherwise, I mean, there are certainly ways to reach me. Just drop me an email or stuff like that, and we can talk about this. Very exciting topic. There are also further reading suggestions, which are also difficult to put in here. I would certainly suggest to read the apocalyptic books in the Bible because this is just fascinating stuff. And also there's a reader about apocalyptic thought, and I would very much suggest that. But obviously I'm so well prepared that I haven't noted down the title. It's Cultures of Eschatology. It's volume from, let me see, De Kruiter. So Cultural History of Apocalyptic Thought, Kulturgeschichte der Apokalypse. I will very much recommend this because this is also discussing other parts of eschatologies, other apocalyptic settings, also how it works in Buddhist communities, and for example. So for those of you who want to go deeper in the topic, I would very much suggest having a look there. So that's from me. I hope that it is not too bad and that you have been able following me here. And next time I promise I will have a less boring presentation with moving pictures and videos and more fancy stuff. But now I think it's important to finish. And I hope, as I said, you learned something, and see you in another context. Bye.